Hi, friends. Welcome to Testify. I hope you all are having a great day, and I hope that you're enjoying our Bible studies. And today we're going to do the book of Second Kings as part of Bible study. And we also mentioned in the last book of First Kings that the author of First and Second Kings is assumed to be the prophet Jeremiah. And as we go through it, you'll see why. It's very similar in terms of facts according to the history of Israel to the book of Jeremiah. So, Second Kings opens up with King Ahaziah. Now, this king was the son of Queen Jezebel and wicked King Ahab. So Elijah rebuked this King Ahaziah because he consulted a false god instead of the God of Israel. Elijah then also prophesied against King Ahaziah, and he told him that he would die from injuries. The king sought to silence Elijah and reverse this prophecy. So he sent a total of 150 men and 3 captains to arrest Elijah. But Elijah called down fire from heaven and killed these men, and only the last captain, who showed some humility, was spared. So Elijah goes with the last captain who was spared to King Ahaziah, and he tells him because of inquiring of Baal, he will surely die. And we see that the prophecy of Elijah does come to pass because King Ahaziah does die. So this book of Second Kings gives us many accounts, very important information. We get introduced to Prophet Elijah and Elisha as well. And we also see or we meet kings of northern Israel and southern Judah. So the account of Elijah taken up to heaven. So while Elijah was walking and talking with Elisha, the fiery chariot separated them, and Elijah ascended up into heaven without experiencing death. Now, this is a kind of rapture typology because Elijah never experienced natural death. Now, Elijah knew very well he was going up to be ascended or to be raptured because he even mentions it to Elisha on the day that it happened by saying, "Before I am taken away from thee." And we also see some of the prophets on that day reminding his assistant Elisha that his master was going to be taken up. So Elisha was the assistant of Elijah. So Elijah, he was the main prophet, and he was now ascended up to heaven or raptured, and his successor was Elisha. So they are two different people. Both were very remarkable prophets. So Elisha is now the successor, and he's now taken over as the new prophet of northern Israel. And Elisha asked God for double the amount of power that Elijah had. And strange as the book of First Kings records 7 of those miracles of Elijah, and the book of Second Kings records 14 miracles of Elisha. And some of the miracles of Elisha I just want to go through, demonstrating that he was indeed an anointed prophet, was he parted the Jordan River. So he hits the water with Elijah's mantle, and the waters divided. He cursed mocking youth, and the bears attacked them. And then we see the account of the widow's oil, where the widow could not afford to pay off her debt. So he multiplied a small amount of oil, and she was able to sell the oil and pay off the debt. We also see the account of the Shunammite woman, who was quite a wealthy woman, and she provided a room, a bed, and a meal whenever Elisha passed by. So Elisha prophesied a son over her life as she could not bear any kids. And we see that she does indeed have the son, but not long after that, the son does die. And we see yet another miracle of Elisha where he resurrects the Shunammite son. Now, I must warn you that these miracles are through the power of God and not the power of man. Obviously, these are anointed prophets of God. Then also Elisha, during the famine in Samaria, promises food. So he renders a pot of stew in Gilgal. And when these people taste the stew, they taste some bitter wild seeds and they cry death in the pot. So Elisha then adds flour to the mixture, neutralizing it and making it safe to eat, demonstrating God's power again. And Elisha also multiplies barley loaves to feed 100 men in Gilgal as well. Another account is of Naaman's leprosy. Now, Naaman was a Syrian commander who suffered from leprosy. He was instructed to go to Elisha. Elisha then advised him to go to the Jordan River, wash 7 times, and he would be healed from this leprosy. Now, Elisha did not take any payment for this miracle because obviously he knew that this was the power of God in demonstration of these miracles. But his servant Gehazi pursued Naaman after he left and got payment from this commander. And when he got back, Elisha already knew about this via discernment, and he cursed Gehazi because of his lies, and Gehazi was struck with leprosy. Elisha also predicted the end of the famine in Samaria. And we see, as I said, Elisha and Elijah were great, remarkable prophets who were definitely anointed by God, because even after Elisha's death, his bones revived a corpse to life again. And an important account also found in on this book of Second Kings is where the Shunammite woman, this is the one now that provided a room for Elisha and whose son was raised from the dead. Elisha advised her to leave Israel due to a 7-year famine, and she went along to live in the Philistines. Now, upon her return, she found that her land and her house was taken over. So the woman appealed to the king and was sharing a story with him. And the king commanded that not only her land and her house be returned, but also all the income and produce that her land generated for the absence of 7 years be restored to her. So as I mentioned earlier, there is many kings in the book of Second Kings, hence the name. And we find also in the book of First Kings said there were 8 notable kings that came out from southern Judah, but they were all evil kings that came out from the northern part of Israel. So now we're just going to go through the important ones that are noted in scripture from southern Judah. So the first one I mentioned was Asa, was a very good king. He removed idols, but then he did not remove high places. Now, high places are referring to the hills and the mountains and the altars they used to worship God or idols. So all those idolatry from those places he did not remove. Then we have his son, Jehoshaphat, also a very good king, and he brought revival. But then he aligned with King Ahab of the north. The third good king, actually excellent king, Hezekiah, one of the most significant kings, and he reopened the temple, he destroyed all idolatrous altars, and he reinstated the Passover celebration, which Israel hadn't celebrated for a number of years. Now, Hezekiah was struck with a terminal illness, and through the prophet, prophesied through the prophet Isaiah from God, and was told to get his house in order. But Hezekiah did not receive that prophecy. In fact, he went down on his knees, he fasted, he prayed, and he negotiated with God with strong reasons. He brought his strong reasons to God, and we see that he was healed from this terminal illness and he was given 15 more years. On the second account, King Hezekiah also was, I would say, intimidated by King Sennacherib, and he was from the Assyrian army. And he wanted to, challenge or demand that Hezekiah surrender. However, Hezekiah spread the blasphemous letter before the Lord in the temple, and we see that God's mighty power makes the Assyrian army withdraw. The next excellent king is King Josiah. Now, he's considered one of the best kings, and he discovered a book of law that was lost. And he also put in place all the religious reforms, he eliminated pagan worship. And we see that King Josiah is considered to be a more superior king than Hezekiah. Many will disagree with me, but according to research, we see that King Josiah, his devotion to God was unwavering, unlike Hezekiah, who had a lot of personal pride. We must also remember that Hezekiah wanted to make alliances with Egypt and neighboring countries. And we also see that he allowed the Babylonian king to come in and view the treasury of Jerusalem as well. So those are the kings of the four kings. And then we have one more, Jotham, also a very good king. He was a righteous king and he also rebuilt parts of the temple. So these five that I'm discussing now, I've discussed now, is Asa, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah, Josiah, and Jotham, were very good kings of Israel. And then we also have the other three, which falls under notable kings, but these kings tend to fall into idolatry towards the end of their reign, and these are Joash. Now, this king was crowned at the age of 7, and he fell into idolatry later on. King Amaziah, who is the son of Joash, he started off well, but then he started worshipping the gods of Edom. And then, lastly, to end the 8 good kings of southern Judah is Uzziah, who is the son of Amaziah. He ruled for 52 years, but then he was struck with leprosy because he started burning incense in the temple. So those were the 8 notable kings or good kings that came out of southern Judah. Now back to the prophet Elisha. Elisha ministered for 60 to 70 years and he died of a fatal disease. And we know with King Ahab, he dies in the book of First Kings, and he was struck by a Assyrian soldier. Jezebel survived him for about 10 to 20 years, and then she was also killed by being thrown out from a window by her own servants under King Jehu's orders. And we see her being trampled by horses. Now, King Jehu, this was a prophecy from Elijah that there will be someone who will bring down the house of Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And we see that prophecy being fulfilled. Now, coming to northern Israel, we see no good kings coming from them. But 4 notable kings that were mentioned in scripture is Jeroboam the first. This is the man who split the nation. Now we know that King Saul, David, Solomon were kings of a united nation of Israel. And after Solomon, the nation of Israel split into southern Judah and northern Israel. This is the guy who was responsible for splitting the nation, and he led the rebellion. So he actually built 2 temples to compete with Solomon's temple, and he put a golden calf in each temple. So he led the nation of northern Israel into great idolatry. And then we hear of Ahab, we know of him. That's the husband of Queen Jezebel. And together they led Israel into severe Baal worship. And they also stole the land of Naboth and got him executed. And I mentioned King Jehu, who actually brought down the house of Ahab as well as Jezebel. So he's also mentioned as one of the kings of the northern Israel. He killed everyone in Jezreel. He destroyed the cult of Baal. And even though he was not a believer of the God of Israel. And lastly, the second Jeroboam. So we have King Jeroboam the first, and this is King Jeroboam the second. This guy reigned for 40 years. He led the kingdom into economic prosperity. But prophets like Hosea and Amos criticized him because of the social injustice during that period of his reign. Now we know there were 3 attacks on Jerusalem or Judah, And why I did say at the beginning, this does definitely look like the um, prophet Jeremiah's writings, is because very similar history was mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. And we see that the prophet Jeremiah started prophesying at the age of 15 to 20, and he lived through these three attacks of Judah or Jerusalem. And when he was 40, under the king or the reign of King Josiah, the first attack took place. And this is where they carried away some of the elite, including Daniel, into captivity. So when Jeremiah was around 50 to 60, the second attack took place. And this is when captives were taken, as well as some of the treasures in the temple were taken, including Prophet Ezekiel. He was also one of the captives. And then the third and final attack is the one that's also recorded in the end of book of Second Kings. And this is under the king of the reignship of King Zedekiah. It was an 18-month siege where the city walls were destroyed, as well as the burning of the temple, and there was a mass deportation of the population, leaving some of the poor people who then fled to surrounding cities like Egypt and Edom and so on. Now, the people responsible for this attack was uh, the people of Babylon and under the king Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, the entire three attacks he was actually responsible for. This was prophesied in the book of Jeremiah as well. And we see a lot of the major and minor prophets were also prophesying about this very same event. So I hope that this Bible studies bring you one step closer to understanding Scripture. As you read Scripture, I hope that this somewhat makes it easy for you to understand and brings the information together. And please join us for more on this channel. Take care and God bless.